What if everything you've been told about eating during serious illness was incomplete? Most people think food is just something to keep you going, something passive, something secondary. But what if the truth is very different? What if what you put on your plate every single day is actively influencing how your body fights, repairs, and protects itself? This isn't about trends, diets, or quick fixes. This is about understanding that food is not just fuel, it's a signal. It tells your body what to do, how to respond, and whether to strengthen or weaken its natural defenses. And right now, without realizing it, many people are sending the wrong signals. In this video, you're going to discover a completely different way of thinking, one that shifts eating from something passive into something powerful. Because once you see this clearly, you'll never look at food the same way again. Before we go any further, you need to understand something important. This perspective doesn't come from theory alone. It comes from patterns. Real patterns observed over time across many people who believed they were doing everything right and still found themselves facing serious health challenges. What becomes clear when you look at those patterns is this: most advice out there isn't completely wrong, but it's incomplete. It focuses on isolated pieces instead of the full system, and that's where people get misled. You'll hear things like eat healthy, take supplements, or just avoid sugar. And while those things matter, they don't explain why two people can follow similar routines and end up with completely different outcomes. One stays strong and resilient. The other slowly declines without understanding why. The difference isn't luck, it's how well their internal systems are actually functioning. In real-world situations, the body doesn't respond to single actions, it responds to patterns. How you eat, how your body processes nutrients, how it repairs itself, how it clears what it doesn't need. All of these are connected, and when one part is off, it affects everything else. Another key observation is that breakdown doesn't happen overnight. It's gradual, subtle, often invisible at first. By the time symptoms appear, the process has already been happening for a long time. That's why surface-level advice can create a false sense of security. You think you're doing enough, but you're only addressing part of the equation. What we're going to do here is different. Instead of focusing on isolated tips, we're going to look at the system as a whole and the specific patterns that consistently support resilience over time. Now, here's where most people get misled, and it's not their fault. It's because the message they've been given sounds simple, logical, and incomplete. You've probably heard it before. Just eat whatever you can tolerate, or focus on calories, not quality, or even food doesn't really matter that much right now. And on the surface, that advice seems practical. But when you look deeper, it misses something critical. Because what you eat doesn't just sit in your body, it actively interacts with it. Every bite sends signals. Signals that can either support your internal defenses or slowly weaken them. Another common belief is that if you just take enough supplements, you can make up for everything else, or that avoiding one bad thing like sugar is enough to fix the problem. But the body doesn't work in isolated switches. There's no single shortcut that overrides everything else. What actually happens is more subtle. You can be eating okay, taking a few supplements, and still creating an internal environment that isn't fully supportive. Not because you're doing something obviously wrong, but because you're missing how everything connects. This is why some people feel confused. They think they're doing the right things, but they're not seeing the results they expected. And the reason is simple. They're focusing on parts instead of the whole system. Real change doesn't come from one adjustment. It comes from aligning multiple layers at once: nutrition, internal balance, recovery, and how your body processes everything you give it. And until you see that clearly, it's easy to follow advice that sounds right, but doesn't go far enough. So, if it's not just about calories, supplements, or avoiding a few bad foods, what's really driving the outcome? It comes down to something deeper: your body's internal defense system. Right now, whether you're aware of it or not, your body is constantly working behind the scenes. It's identifying damaged cells, repairing small errors, clearing out waste, and maintaining balance across multiple systems at once. This isn't something that happens occasionally, it's happening all the time. But here's the key: that system only works as well as the signals it receives. When the right signals are present through proper nutrition, balance, and recovery, your body becomes more efficient. It detects problems earlier, it responds faster, it repairs more effectively. But when those signals are disrupted by poor nutrition, internal stress, or imbalance, the system doesn't shut off completely. It just becomes less effective, slower, less precise. And that's where the problem begins. Because this decline doesn't feel dramatic at first. You don't notice it immediately. Everything still seems normal on the surface. But underneath, your body is no longer operating at full capacity. This is why two people can live very similar lifestyles and still have completely different outcomes. One has a system that's well supported and responsive. The other has a system that's gradually losing efficiency without realizing it. So instead of asking, what should I eat? The better question is, what signals am I sending to my body every day? Because once you understand that, everything shifts. And what we're about to go into next are the specific ways you can start strengthening that system, starting from the most important place of all. Now let's start with one of the most important shifts you can make, and it begins with removing what's feeding the problem. Because before you think about adding anything new, you have to look at what's already there. And for many people, one of the biggest hidden drivers is something they consume every single day without thinking: refined sugar and processed carbohydrates. These aren't just empty calories. They change how your body behaves. They create instability in your internal environment, pushing your system toward a more reactive, inflamed state. And over time, that makes it much harder for your body to maintain balance and respond effectively. What's important to understand is that certain cells thrive in that kind of environment. They rely on quick, accessible fuel sources, and when those are constantly available, it gives them an advantage. On the other hand, your healthy cells are designed to function differently. They operate more efficiently when your system is stable, when energy is steady, when oxygen use is optimized, and when your internal environment isn't constantly being disrupted. This is why one of the most powerful first steps is also one of the simplest. Reduce and remove refined sugars and highly processed carbohydrates, not temporarily, but consistently. In their place, shift toward clean, whole foods, foods that are closer to their natural state, foods that provide steady, usable energy instead of spikes and crashes. This isn't about restriction, it's about changing the environment inside your body. Because when you stop feeding what shouldn't be supported and start fueling what should be, something begins to shift. Your system stabilizes, your responses become more controlled, and your body is finally able to operate in a way that supports strength, not imbalance. Now that you've started removing what disrupts your system, the next step is just as important: what you replace it with. Because it's not enough to simply cut things out. Your body still needs the right inputs to function, repair, and stay stable. And this is where many people make a second mistake. They remove the bad, but don't fully rebuild with the right foundation. Think of it this way: your body is constantly rebuilding itself. Every cell, every tissue, every system depends on the quality of the materials you provide. If those materials are weak, inconsistent, or lacking in key nutrients, your system can't perform at its best, no matter how hard it tries. This is why the focus needs to shift toward clean, nutrient-dense foods. Not just food that fills you up, but food that actually supports function. Whole foods, close to their natural state, minimally processed, rich in vitamins, minerals, and compounds your body can actually use. Another key factor here is reducing your overall toxic load. The more processed and artificial your food becomes, the more your body has to work just to deal with it. And that takes energy away from repair, recovery, and protection. When you move toward cleaner sources, fresh ingredients, simple combinations, high quality choices, you're not just eating better, you're making your system more efficient. And here's what's interesting: many different dietary approaches can work, whether it's plant-based, higher protein, or other styles. But what they all have in common, when they're effective, is this one principle: quality. Clean inputs create better outcomes. And once your body starts receiving the right materials consistently, everything begins to shift. Energy becomes more stable, recovery improves, and your internal systems become far more capable of doing what they're designed to do. Now let's move into a more advanced layer, because once your foundation is in place, timing becomes just as important as what you eat. This is where many people overlook a powerful concept: giving your body periods where it isn't constantly processing food. When you're eating all the time, your system is always focused on digestion and storage. But when you create intentional gaps, periods where you're not eating, something different begins to happen. Your body shifts its priority. Instead of processing incoming fuel, it starts to clean up, repair, and rebalance internally. This is the idea behind structured fasting windows. Not extreme restriction, but controlled timing, allowing your body to move between feeding and recovery states in a more natural rhythm. During these windows, your system becomes more efficient. It starts using stored energy more effectively. It reduces unnecessary stress signals, and it creates an internal environment that is less supportive of imbalance. What's even more important is how this timing interacts with other processes in your body. When used correctly, these periods of rest can make your system more responsive, more sensitive to what you introduce later, and more capable of adapting. But this isn't about pushing your body too far, it's about balance. Listening to how your system responds, adjusting based on your needs, and using timing as a tool, not a stressor. Because when you combine clean nutrition with intentional timing, something powerful happens. Your body stops being overwhelmed and starts becoming more efficient. And that efficiency is what allows your system to move away from constant stress and back into a state where it can repair, regulate, and maintain itself more effectively over time. Now let's move into something that quietly determines whether your system can actually keep up with everything you're asking it to do, and that is your body's ability to clear out what it no longer needs. Because every day, your body is producing waste, not just from what you eat, but from normal cellular activity, stress, and environmental exposure. And if that waste isn't removed efficiently, it doesn't just disappear, it starts to accumulate. At first, this buildup is subtle. You don't feel it right away. But over time, it creates resistance inside your system. It slows down how efficiently your body communicates, repairs, and regulates itself. This is why supporting your body's natural clearing processes is so important, not in an extreme or trendy way, but in a way that actually helps your system function as it's designed to. Your body already has built-in pathways to handle this. The key is making sure those pathways have what they need to work properly. When they're supported, your system becomes more efficient at processing and eliminating what doesn't belong. But when they're overwhelmed or not supported at all, your body has to divide its attention. Instead of focusing on repair and protection, it's constantly dealing with excess buildup. And that shift matters, because a system that's overloaded becomes slower, less precise, and less responsive over time. The goal here isn't to force anything, it's to support what's already there. To make it easier for your body to do what it naturally does: clean, reset, and maintain balance. Because once that process improves, something important happens. Your internal environment becomes clearer, signals become more efficient, and your body is able to operate in a way that supports strength rather than being held back by what it can't fully clear. Now, let's move into another critical layer, because even if your system is clearing properly, it still needs the ability to repair and maintain accuracy at a deeper level. Every day, your body is constantly copying, rebuilding, and replacing cells. This process has to be precise. Small errors can happen naturally, but what matters is how well your system can detect and correct those errors before they build up. When your internal repair systems are working efficiently, those small issues are handled quickly. They don't have time to accumulate. They don't create larger problems. Your body simply corrects them and moves on. But when that repair process becomes less efficient, those small errors don't disappear, they linger. And over time, they begin to stack. Not all at once, but gradually, quietly. This is where the concept of internal support systems becomes important. Your body relies on specific nutrients and conditions to carry out these repair functions properly. Without them, the process slows down. It becomes less accurate, less effective. And again, this doesn't create immediate symptoms. You won't feel it happening, but it changes how your system behaves over time. It reduces your margin for error. This is why strengthening these internal processes matters so much. You're not just maintaining your body, you're improving its ability to correct itself, to stay accurate, to stay stable. Because when your system can repair efficiently, it creates resilience. It prevents small issues from becoming larger ones. It keeps everything functioning within a controlled range. And that's the goal, not perfection, but consistency. A system that can continuously monitor, adjust, and maintain itself without falling behind. Once that layer is supported, you're no longer just managing your health, you're actively reinforcing the processes that keep it intact over time. Now let's address something that often goes unnoticed but can quietly interfere with everything you've been working to build: hidden triggers coming from the foods you eat. Because it's not just about whether food is healthy or unhealthy. it's also about how your body reacts to it. And sometimes, even foods that seem normal can create subtle stress inside your system. These reactions aren't always obvious. You might not feel immediate discomfort, but over time, certain foods can contribute to low level inflammation, digestive strain, or internal imbalance. And when that happens repeatedly, your system has to work harder just to maintain stability. This is where the idea of food sensitivity becomes important, not in a restrictive way, but in an awareness based way. Paying attention to how your body responds after eating, noticing patterns, energy drops, bloating, fatigue, mental fog. These are signals, even if they seem mild. When these hidden triggers are present, your body is constantly dividing its attention. Instead of focusing fully on repair and protection, it's also managing unnecessary stress. And that reduces overall efficiency. The goal isn't to eliminate everything, it's to identify what doesn't work for you specifically. Because what one person tolerates well, another might not. By removing or reducing these triggers, even temporarily, you give your system a chance to reset, to operate without constant interference. And when that happens, the difference can be noticeable. Your energy becomes more stable, your digestion improves, your clarity returns, and most importantly, your body can redirect its resources toward what truly matters: repairing, regulating, and maintaining balance. Because sometimes progress isn't about adding more, it's about removing what's quietly holding you back. Now let's talk about something simple but incredibly powerful: hydration and internal flow. Most people think drinking water is enough, but what really matters is how well that water is used inside your body. Because hydration isn't just about fluid, it's about how your cells communicate, how signals move, and how efficiently your system operates. Every cell in your body relies on proper fluid balance to function. When you're well hydrated, nutrients move more easily, waste is cleared more efficiently, signals travel faster and more accurately. But when hydration is low, even slightly, everything slows down. Your system becomes less responsive. Processes that should be smooth become strained. And over time, that creates subtle stress inside your body. Another key factor here is balance. Your body doesn't just need water, it needs the right balance of minerals to support how that water is used. Without that balance, hydration becomes less effective. This is why small improvements can make a big difference. Consistent fluid intake, paying attention to how your body feels, supporting your system so it can actually use what you give it. Because when your internal environment is properly hydrated, something important happens. Your body becomes more efficient, more responsive, more capable of maintaining stability. And while this may seem like a basic step, it's one of those foundational pieces that everything else depends on. Get this right, and your system has a much better chance of functioning the way it was designed to. Now let's move into one of the most overlooked but most critical pieces of the entire system: protein. Because when your body is trying to repair, rebuild, and maintain itself, it needs raw materials. And protein is one of the primary building blocks it relies on. Every tissue in your body, muscles, enzymes, immune components, depends on adequate protein to function properly. Without it, your system simply doesn't have what it needs to repair damage or maintain strength over time. This is where many people fall short. They focus on cutting things out, reducing sugar, avoiding processed foods, but they don't replace those calories with enough high-quality protein. And as a result, their body begins to lose strength instead of rebuilding it. The impact of that isn't always immediate, but it's significant. Recovery becomes slower, energy becomes less stable, and your body's ability to maintain resilience starts to decline. The key here is consistency, making sure that your intake supports your body's needs not just occasionally, but daily. And just as important as the amount is the quality: clean, well-sourced protein that your body can actually use efficiently, because when the source is poor, your body has to work harder to process it, reducing the overall benefit. When you get this right, something shifts. Your body has the materials it needs to repair tissue, maintain structure, and support internal systems. And that changes the direction from gradual breakdown to active rebuilding. Now that you understand how important protein is, the next question becomes just as critical. Where is that protein coming from? Because not all protein is equal, and the source you choose can either support your system or quietly add more stress to it. When protein comes from clean, high-quality sources, your body can use it efficiently. It's easier to digest, easier to absorb, and more effective at supporting repair and recovery. But when the source is heavily processed or low quality, your body has to work harder just to break it down. And in doing so, it creates additional strain, taking energy away from the very processes you're trying to support. This is why quality matters so much. Choosing sources that are closer to their natural state, foods that haven't been heavily altered, filled with additives, or exposed to unnecessary chemicals. For some people, this might mean focusing on animal-based sources that are raised and prepared cleanly. For others, it may include plant-based options that are easier to digest and properly combined. The key isn't to follow a rigid rule, it's to choose what your body responds to best, while keeping the standard of quality high. Because when your protein sources are clean, something important happens. Your body doesn't just receive nutrients, it receives usable materials. Materials that it can efficiently turn into strength, repair, and stability. And over time, that difference compounds. Instead of constantly trying to keep up, your system begins to rebuild more effectively because it finally has the right inputs to do so. Now, let's move into one of the most important control centers in your entire body, your gut. Because what happens here doesn't stay here. It influences how your immune system responds, how nutrients are absorbed, and even how your body communicates internally. Inside your digestive system lives a complex ecosystem, trillions of microorganisms working together. When this system is balanced, it supports stability. It helps regulate inflammation, strengthens your internal defenses, and improves how your body processes everything you consume. But when that balance is disrupted, the effects spread. Your system becomes more reactive. Signals become less precise, and your ability to maintain internal control starts to weaken. This is why diversity matters. The more balanced and varied this internal ecosystem is, the more resilient your body becomes. Different types of nutrients support different types of beneficial organisms, and together, they create a stronger, more stable environment. Another key factor is consistency. It's not about one perfect meal, it's about repeated patterns over time. Small daily inputs that gradually shift your internal environment in the right direction. When your gut is supported, everything else becomes easier. Nutrients are absorbed more effectively, signals are clearer, your immune responses become more coordinated. And that's the real goal, creating an internal environment that works with you, not against you. Because when this system is functioning well, it doesn't just support digestion, it supports your entire body's ability to maintain balance, respond efficiently, and stay resilient over time. Now let's look at another layer that quietly shapes your internal environment, your fat intake. Because fat is often misunderstood, some people avoid it completely, while others consume it without paying attention to quality. But the truth sits in the middle. The type of fat you consume can either calm your system or add to internal stress. Healthy fats play a key role in how your body regulates itself. They support cellular structure, help stabilize energy, and are involved in many signaling processes that keep your system balanced. When these fats are present in the right form, your body functions more smoothly. On the other hand, low-quality fats, especially highly processed ones, can have the opposite effect. They can disrupt normal signaling, contribute to inflammation, and make your system less efficient over time. This is why choosing the right sources matters. Fats that come from clean, minimally processed origins are far more supportive. They provide steady energy and help maintain internal stability rather than creating fluctuations. Another important point is balance. Your body doesn't need excess, it needs the right proportion. Too little, and certain functions become less efficient. Too much of the wrong type, and the system becomes overloaded. When you get this right, something subtle but powerful happens. Your energy becomes more stable, your internal environment becomes less reactive, and your body is better able to maintain a steady state without constant ups and downs. Because just like everything else, it's not about extremes. It's about giving your body the right inputs so it can operate the way it was designed to. Now let's move into a more advanced layer where small additions can create a much bigger impact over time. Because beyond your core nutrition, there are certain compounds found in natural foods that act almost like signals inside your body. They don't just provide basic nutrients, they influence how your system responds, adapts, and regulates itself. These are the concentrated elements often found in colorful plants, herbs, and certain whole foods. And what makes them powerful is not their quantity, but their function. Even in small amounts, they can support balance at a deeper level. They help regulate internal stress responses, support recovery processes, and contribute to a more stable internal environment. In other words, they don't force your system, they guide it. This is why diversity becomes so important again. The more varied your intake of these natural compounds, the more signals your body receives to maintain balance. Each one plays a slightly different role, and together, they create a broader support system. Another key point is consistency. These are not one-time solutions. Their impact builds over time through repeated exposure. Small amounts, used regularly, can gradually shift how your system behaves. And when combined with everything else you've already put in place, clean nutrition, proper timing, internal support, they act as an amplifier. They enhance what's already working, they reinforce stability. Because at this level, it's not about adding something random, it's about strengthening the system you've already built, so it becomes more resilient, more adaptive, and more capable over time. Now let's talk about something that doesn't show up on any plate but can influence everything you've built so far, your internal state. Because even if your nutrition is dialed in, your system can still struggle if it's constantly under stress. And the reason is simple: your body cannot fully repair and protect itself when it's stuck in a state of tension. When stress becomes chronic, your system shifts into a defensive mode. Energy is redirected away from long-term processes like repair and maintenance and toward short-term survival. This might be useful in brief moments, but not when it becomes your default state. Over time, this creates imbalance. Signals become less coordinated, recovery slows down, and your body becomes less efficient at doing the very things you're trying to support. This is why learning how to shift into a calmer state matters just as much as what you eat. When your body moves into a more relaxed mode, everything changes. Your system becomes more receptive. Processes that were slowed begin to function more smoothly. Simple practices can help guide this shift: intentional breathing, quiet moments, stepping away from constant stimulation. These aren't just relaxation tools, they're signals. Signals that tell your body it's safe to restore, to repair, and to rebalance. Because true support isn't just physical, it's also internal. And when you combine both what you put into your body and the state you allow it to be in, you create an environment where your system can finally operate at its full potential instead of constantly trying to catch up. Now let's bring this beyond nutrition and internal processes, because your environment and daily lifestyle shape everything we've talked about so far. Your body doesn't exist in isolation. It responds to how you live, how you move, how you connect, and how you structure your day. These external patterns feed directly into your internal state. Movement is one of the simplest yet most powerful signals. When you move regularly, circulation improves, internal flow becomes more efficient, and your system stays active instead of stagnant. It doesn't have to be extreme. Consistency matters more than intensity. Sunlight is another key factor. Natural light helps regulate your internal rhythms, supporting better energy during the day and deeper recovery at night. But one of the most overlooked elements is connection. People who live in supportive, connected environments tend to function differently. Their systems are more balanced, their stress levels lower, and their overall resilience higher. This is not accidental. It's a pattern seen again and again. When people live with purpose, connection, and routine, their bodies reflect that stability. And finally, simplicity. Preparing real food, staying active, being present. These are not complex strategies, but they are powerful when done consistently. Because when your lifestyle supports your biology, everything begins to align. Not through one big change, but through daily patterns that reinforce strength, balance, and long-term resilience. Now here's where everything comes together and where your advantage truly begins. Because there is no single perfect plan that works for everyone. What matters is how well your approach fits your body, your needs, and your current state. You've now seen the key components: nutrition, timing, internal balance, recovery, lifestyle. But the real power comes from how you combine them into a system that works specifically for you. This is where awareness becomes control. Instead of following general advice, you begin to observe patterns: how your body responds, what improves your energy, what creates resistance. And with that awareness, you can adjust, fine-tune, optimize. Today, this process is easier than ever. You can take structured principles and build a personalized routine that fits your preferences, your schedule, and your goals. Not rigid, but adaptable. Because flexibility is part of resilience. When you move away from a one-size-fits-all mindset, something changes. You stop guessing, you stop reacting, you begin to operate with intention. And that's the difference. Not perfection, but precision. Because when you have a clear structure and the ability to adapt it to yourself, you're no longer just following advice. You're creating a system that supports you consistently, sustainably, and over the long term.